press conference about the book Muhammeds Girls, which is now available in Swedish. It was first published in Danish in 2011, and hopefully we can translate it next year into English. This press conference was actually intended for Swedish journalists, but not one of them were the least bit interested. I'm not at all surprised. They are too afraid to learn about the horrible things in Islam. They prefer to live in La La Land, where Islam is the religion of peace and no women are oppressed. But as everyone can read in Lars Hedegaards' book, Muhammeds Girls, Islam presents a terrifying world to women. It's a world of genital mutilation, honor killings, rape, forced marriages, oppression, physical and psychological abuse. It is the world that millions of Muslim women live in. Hedegaard wrote the book after standing trial for hate speech, of which he was finally acquitted by Denmark's Supreme Court in 2012. The reason he was indicted was that he had claimed that Muslim men raped their daughters and that rape is deeply rooted in Islamic culture. This may seem a very harsh and generalizing statement and was of course completely taken out of context, but the book proves he was right. Today we have three distinguished guests to talk about the book and why it is so important that Westerners learn about Islam. Anne-Marie Waters from Great Britain, running for Parliament for UKIP next year, and founder of the website Sharia Watch. Mona Walter, a Somali woman who converted from Islam to Christianity 10 years ago, and Nicolai Sennels, a Danish psychologist with a lot of experience of young Muslim men and their view on women. But first we will hear a few words from Lars Hedegaard, and as he writes in the book, the key to the revolution Islam is in such obvious need of is the liberation of the Muslim women. And what could be more appropriate than starting with the Muslim women living right here among us? That is the question I will put to the speakers today. Is that even possible? Will the Muslim women living right here among us ever fight for their own liberation? Lars Hedegaard.
Thank you. As you may know, the immediate reason why I wrote this book was that in 2011 I was in the middle of an irritating court trial due to my perceived racist remarks about the behavior of 800 million Muslim men. Fortunately, the case, as Ingrid mentioned, was adjudicated by the Danish Supreme Court that decided to acquit me. In any event, the book ought to have been written no matter what. The book's reception in Denmark back in 2011 was surprisingly benevolent. Some of the reviewers were even kind enough to admit that I had a point. I never expected a similar welcome in Sweden due to the peculiar conditions in that country. And frankly speaking, I never expected any Swedish journalist to turn up for this event. My Swedish colleagues were decided to go ahead anyway, and of course there's a point in having this gathering. We'll make a video of the event and spread it as far and wide as we can. Had Sweden been a normal country with a free press, one would have assumed that there would have been some interest in what I have to say. Sweden is, after all, world leader in third world immigration, including immigration from cultures that have proven hard, if not impossible, to integrate into Swedish society. It is also a world leader in rape, with 10 times as many rapes per inhabitant as Denmark. It is also among the European champions when it comes to no-go areas outside the control of central government. We may safely predict that if this trend is allowed to continue and everything points in that direction, Sweden will have become a failed state in less than 10 years. Some would argue that it already is. Recently, a UN survey predicted that Sweden will be a third world country by 2030. Just a few days ago it came to light that 60 girls in the town of Norrköping had been genitally mutilated, including every girl in just one school class. Their clitoris and labia have been removed and their private parts stitched together, leaving just a small hole. This was news for a few hours, followed by deafening silence. Even the so-called feminist organizations in Sweden are uninterested and have consistently opposed systematic medical checks to detect how widespread this practice is. So it is left to others to gather whatever information is available. But my book is not really about conditions in Sweden, Denmark, or any other particular country. It's about the general condition of women as rooted in Islamic teaching and canonical interpretation over 1400 years. And that is indeed a taboo all over the Western world. We are sometimes permitted to mention individual incidents, a female victim of an honor killing here, a woman stoned or hanged for extramarital sex there, but we are never allowed to stand back and get the whole picture. And in particular, we are never allowed to describe the links between the despicable treatment of women and girls in Muslim culture and the teachings of Muhammad and his followers. If we do that, we are automatically branded as racists, xenophobes, and fascists, and our findings and conclusions are disqualified without anyone taking a look. I refuse to submit to such oppression, whatever the consequences. One may well ask why I have taken an interest in the condition of women under Islam. The reason is obvious. Islam and Muslim culture are no longer phenomena in faraway lands. When I was a child, there were perhaps 100 Muslims in Denmark, or even less. Now we have hundreds of thousands. In Sweden, there are even more. With the Muslim immigration comes Islam and Islamic cultural habits. So we have no choice other than trying to learn what that ideology stands for and how we may expect a certain share of immigrants to behave. Honor killings, genital mutilation, mass rape, large-scale child abuse, forced marriage, polygamy, grooming. Phenomena that used to practically be unheard of in this part of the world are now taking place next door. It has become our problem whether we like it or not. As recent events have gone to show, Westerners had better abandon their belief that they can effect any meaningful change in Muslim-dominated countries. We can give money, try to persuade, or send in troops. It will make precisely no difference, so long as the terrible teachings of the Prophet hold sway. And I wonder how long Danish and Swedish men will simply watch while such practices proliferate, before they start thinking, how come that Muhammad can get away with it while I'm expected to follow the law? Why not join the followers of the Prophet as they seem to have so much fun? There's another reason we should be concerned with the plight of Muslim women, that is the oppression and immigration of women in the House of Islam are the very core of Islam. Without it, Islam will collapse like a house of cards. So, the liberation of Muslim women is the key to the emancipation of 1.6 billion human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars. And I would like to welcome Anne-Marie Waters.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me to come. Sorry, I'll go to that. Obviously, lovely to be in Scandinavia, beautiful Scandinavia, a part of the world I've long admired, and a part of the world that I'm increasingly worried about, just as I'm worried about my own country, the UK, and for the same reasons. I myself wrote a book last year about the influence that Islam is having in Western societies, and in particular on our freedom of speech and on the treatment of women. And as I was researching for this book, I spoke to a lot of people. One of the people I spoke to is a very prominent journalist in Britain, very widely published, very well trusted. And she told me that about 25, 30 years ago, she did an investigation and wrote an article about a new phenomenon in England, the organised rape of young English girls, which was happening primarily across English cities in the north of England. She had evidence for this, she had people willing to give personal testimony to this. She wrote a huge coverage of it. Not a single newspaper would print it. And again, this was not some graduate who they were taking a risk on. This was a very widely trusted journalist. That was about 30 years ago. What happened since then? The police wouldn't touch it, the press wouldn't touch it. They told her that she was whipping up trouble. She was, not the rapists. And causing an expansion of racism. So, nothing happened, it carried on, and we've had since then several decades of the same thing. It's growing, it grew, it came out of the north of England, it's now all over England. And suddenly in 2011, for some reason, some inexplicable reason, and I've tried to find someone who can give an explanation for this and I can't, but suddenly in 2011 it exploded. Suddenly we had arrests, suddenly we had trial after trial. And the press were all over it, and the commentary was all over it, and everyone was talking about it all of a sudden. There was one particular imam, Dr. Taj Hargi, used to be a very popular imam in Britain. He used to appear on television a lot. You don't hear quite so much of him anymore. And this is what he wrote in the Daily Mail, a very important paper in Britain. And this is what he wrote. He said, on one level, most imams in the UK are simply using their puritanical sermons to promote the wearing of the hijab and even the burqa among their female adherents. But the dire result can be the brutish misogyny we've seen in the Oxford sex ring. This guy is an imam in Oxford. He was talking about a trial which had just finished, where 7 men, including 2 sets of brothers, so a lot of family connections in this, had been jailed for life for what the judge called crimes of the utmost depravity. They'd been found guilty of rape, trafficking and organised prostitution. And what Dr. Targi said was that race and religion are inextricably linked to this abuse. And I think that may have been the only time that religion was mentioned in connection with this organised rape gangs. From then on, the British media insisted that this was not a matter of religion at all, but a matter of race. The word Muslim never appeared again after that, and suddenly these men found themselves labelled Asians, and that is still how they're labelled. So the irony is that in their desperate bid not to be racists, they labelled these men by slandering an entire continent to avoid naming the religion. And it's difficult to find statistics to say how many of these men were Muslim, but international journalists label it from around 90 to 95%. The girls are overwhelmingly young, white English girls. Mostly, the rapists are mostly from Pakistan, or of Pakistani background. But again, the word Muslim was never used, it's all Asians. But of course, the truth is that they made it into a race issue rather than a religion issue, and ignored the fact that a race will not teach you contempt for women, but a religion might. And a race won't teach you that women who are not covered from head to toe in a black cloth deserve to be raped, but a religion might. And to get some common sense into this, we have to look at the background of some of these men and what they are taught to believe. As I said, most of them are of Pakistani background. How are women treated in Pakistan? you have a country where tribal Sharia courts stone women to death for being raped. You have a country where if a woman alleges rape, she has to produce 4 male Muslim witnesses, or she will find herself on charges of adultery and risks death by stoning. Do we really, really think that a society that thinks of women in this way, that a society that thinks of rape in this way, will have no bearing and no influence whatsoever on the men who grow up in that society? And do we then think that when those men move en masse into Western countries, that they somehow leave those beliefs behind them? They don't. They're here. They're in Britain, and it's having a massive, massive impact on the lives of British women. And particularly young girls. We're talking about girls of 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. I spoke to another woman when I was writing this book, a woman who lived in a northern English city, the city of Bradford, where this originally started from. And she worked in a women's shelter. And she again told me about what she called a conspiracy of silence that was going on there for decades. So this is a hugely, hugely significant phenomenon. But it's all linked to Islam. It's all linked. There is a global, what I would sum up in one word, and that word is simply appeasement. It's not about race. It's about not upsetting the imams, not upsetting the mullahs, not upsetting the mosque leaders. That's what it has always been about. And it's a global issue. It is a global phenomenon. It's the same appeasement that allows us in Britain to have around 85 Sharia courts, treating women absolutely appallingly. It's the same appeasement that allows the men who run these bodies to go and talk to government and advocate that we bring Islamic Sharia law into British Constitution itself. It's the same appeasement that allows us on a global scale to put countries like Saudi Arabia onto an international human rights council. There is a global growth of Islamism, of Wahhabism funded through Saudi Arabia. We are appeasing it, we are accommodating it, we are facilitating it, and it's all the same ideology that put Saudi Arabia onto a Human Rights Council, a country that maims, mutilates, murders, beheads, amputates its own people for speaking, a country that stones women to death for adultery, is now sitting on a United Nations Human Rights Council. Iran, another country where women have property, women are stoned to death in public squares for adultery, is now sitting on an International Women's Rights Council. It is exactly the same appeasement that is allowing young girls to be raped in Britain. It's got nothing to do with race, it's got to do with the fact that we will not confront the misogyny at the very, very heart of this religion. We will not upset the imams, and until that this is a religious issue, it is a global religious issue, this will carry on. We will have more rape gangs, we will have more women raped across the Western world, we will have more honour killings, we will have more FGM. By the way, I saw this morning there's a petition going around England to protest against FGM in Sweden.
Oh.
So,
thank you for having us.
You're welcome. So if the Swedish won't do it, maybe we can get the English to do it. But we have to confront this. We have to confront it. We are selling women's rights. If we don't do it, the hard fought for rights that women have across the West, that brilliant women have spent centuries building, we will lose them. We're on the verge of it now. And it isn't just Muslim women's rights that are at risk, it's every woman's, and we've got to.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. And I'm from Somalia. I moved to Sweden in '94 from Somalia. Civil war in Somalia. In Somalia, we didn't have Islam. I mean, we didn't know anything about Islam. And we were just Muslims, like Sweden is a Christian country today. We didn't know anything about mosque. I never met imam, except when somebody dies or a wedding. So I came to '94 in Sweden, dressed in normal, 20-year-old Somali woman, dirab, they call it dirab. We have a very, it's beautiful Somali dress and my jeans on. I wanted this mosque. My friend took me to a mosque.
then we sit and we talk, and she told me that I have to put on this big, they call it a bib. So I say, no, I'm not going to put on that. I don't want that. Why? Because nobody asked me in Somalia. Why should I wear now? I said, you have to try. I try and I sit there and I listen. And more I listen to the Quran, and Imam preached and he talked about how he is supposed to be a good Muslim, because we are not good Muslim. Back home in Somalia, we are kafirs. So we have to be a good Muslim. I was very, very scared when he read from the Quran and says that you should not be friends with the Swedish people, with the kafirs. He didn't say Swedish people, he said kafirs. Because be careful, you can go to their school, you can learn from them, but you should not be friends with them, because they will change you. You will be one of them. So be careful. I was very, very sad and upset to hear that, because in Somalia, we have minority Christians, we have a Catholic church and a mosque next to each other in Mogadishu. If you Google the old picture in Somalia, you can see that. And we have a Hindu. I never heard of that. I should hate them or not be friends with them. I was very upset and said, no, I don't want. I mean, every time I went there, I could hear that you stay away from the Swedish society. So I was asking myself, what are we doing here? Why are we here in Sweden? Why can't we move to Saudi Arabia? There they have a Quran and they have Sharia. We can live there. So I've been kicked out from the mosque and from my Swedish society, from my Somali society. So I went into Swedish, marry a Swedish man and have children with a Swedish man. And since then, I've been telling the Swedish authority, police, that we are going to have a war here. Because in the mosque, that's what they tell children. You should hate the kafir. You should make, I mean, he used to tell girls that you have to get married and have a minimum 5, 10 children. In that way, you will be a minority of Sweden. And bring so many relatives that you can. Because in the future, your children will rule this country. And every church here will be a mosque in the future. So everyone believes that Sweden will be their own country. Because that's what Allah said. That's what Allah said. Everyone has to be Muslim, or we just want to kill you. And I said, that's not fair. Why? Why are we, I mean, these nice Swedish people, they let me stay here in Sweden. They're nice people. Because Allah hates them and you should hate them too. That's the answer I get from the Imam. And I've been trying to get contact with the Swedish media to write about it, and this is what they're doing. They're brainwashing children. They're brainwashing to hate everyone and kill everyone who does not accept Islam as a religion. And said, no, this is not true. It's some fundamentalist Imam, and not every Muslim, because Islam is a religion of peace. And I make copy from the Quran and from the Hadith and give to Swedish media. I wrote to Swedish television and tell what I saw in mosque. And in Gothenburg we have 10 different mosques. I say every mosque they teach this. This is what they teach. Oh no, it's extremist. Don't listen to them. Not every Muslim. And I've been talking to Swedish church. Some of them, they don't let me in today to talk and just to tell them what's going on. This is what's going on behind your backyard. This is what they teach children. You will be, I mean, in 10 years, it's game over. You need to meet this Imam and talk to them. Ask them what's going on. And tell them no, because in Sweden we have a democracy. That's why I choose to live in Sweden. Human rights. But in Sharia, we don't have that. So we just have to invite them into democracy and teach them how to live in peace, instead of letting them teach children and brainwash young girls and children that you should die for Allah, for example. Because there are many young boys who die in Al-Shabaab, in Mogadishu, for Al-Shabaab now. And in Syria, even women today are going to die for Allah. So in Sweden, if you speak as a Swedish man or Swedish woman, you are racist. I mean, you cannot criticize Islam or Muslim or anything. But me, how can I be racist? I'm a black woman from Africa. I'm not racist. I'm just telling you, speak of my experience and what I saw in mosque, and what they tell and what they teach and how they treat other human beings. Other human beings, they are pigs and monkeys in Quran. And this is reality. We have this is reality. There's a place called Hamakulan. I cannot go there anymore. Because one day I was sitting in, waiting for a train, and this boy came and sat next to me and we talked. And he saw my cross. He said, "Oh, auntie, are you a Christian? You are going to hell. God's going to burn you in hell." I said, "Why?" "Yeah, because you travel this way and put some clothes on." He's 12 years old. Put some clothes on, you are naked. And he kept talking, and I said, "Oh, this church will be mosque." He told you that Imam says that. So I am so afraid for Sweden. And in Sweden, we say that we have a democracy and freedom of speech. We don't have. Because if you talk to Sweden, I talk to many Sweden journalists and write about it and send them an article about what's going on. They don't publish. They take big duct tape and put it in your mouth. They don't talk. They don't write. And even when I was interviewed by the Swedish television channel 1, she cut half of my interview. I just told her what I'm telling you now, that what they do in mosque, but she cut. She just let me say that they threaten to kill me, and they say I know where you live, and so on. So in Sweden, you can never talk about Islam. You can never talk about Muslim. It's a big problem.
Do you think, Mona, that is because they are afraid of being called racist, Islamophobe, or they're afraid to get killed? Violence?
Oh, I mean, they're scared. First of all, in Sweden, they're scared to be called racist. Because if you criticize Islam or what Muslims do, you are racist automatically, and then they're scared. Because there's this newspaper who, someone sent them Quran and a bomb a few months ago. They're scared. They're scared to be attacked, and they can't admit that they are scared of Muslim. They're scared, and they tell you that, but not every Muslim. They are modern Muslim. Okay, I know that they are modern Muslim. There are many Somali Muslim, liberal Muslim who want to integrate Swedish society, but they're being stopped and threatened. And really, it's the mosque imam who made the law, Sharia law. Many Muslims today in Sweden, they don't live under democracy. They live under Sharia. They have their own area, and they have their own mosque, and the imam tells them what to do, how to dress, how to behave, who to be friends with, who to be married. They have their own law. So they have nothing to do with Sweden. And they don't know anything about Sweden, even, most of them.
How can we reach out to the Muslim women in Sweden? Do you think there's a possibility that we can tell them about their rights and make them come into our democratic society?
No, I don't think so, because I've been telling them since 95, 96 that you have to free yourself from this. But they have to do it themselves, and we just have to tell them, but they don't listen. It's not like one day or 1 year. We just have to tell them, but it's very difficult because they already know what's good and what's bad and what's wrong and what's right. They have it in the Quran, and Allah make that decision for them.
And never listen to the kafir.
Yeah, you do not listen, because in Quran says that you should not respect even the kafirs, they're hypocrites. So that's what they've been told as a child, that you know that you should be, stay away from the couple. Do not be friends with them unless that you are afraid and to protect yourself. You know, this is called taqiyya in Islam, that means protection. You should lie, you should laugh with them, but you should hate them in your heart. So I think it's very difficult to come to them and say, oh, you should not wear hijab today, or you should not do this and that. I think they have to understand for themselves and free themselves. They have to be, want to free themselves from that.
And you told me that you have 3 daughters.
Yeah.
And you are scared for their future.
Yeah.
In Sweden.
Yeah. Of course I am.
Why are you scared?
Yeah, because in Sweden I don't feel like I live under democracy. I don't feel like I'm scared for them, because I live in Sweden, but in a way under Sharia law in Sweden. Because for me, I'm dressed like this. I cannot go to like some places without someone looking at me and, oh, you are naked. In the future, I'm like, I don't know where do we go? Where do we live? How is going to be my children? I asked this imam, I bring a Quran and say, this is the Quran, this is a kill everyone. How can my grandchildren in the future here in Sweden and your grandchildren coexist? Do you think we can coexist? Because Islam says no. I have to be Muslim, my daughters have to be Muslim. Or be Muslim or die. That's what I'm scared of in the future.
Thank you, Mona.
You're welcome.
And now
I wrote the book, Lars.
Thank you.
It's an important, very necessary book, and it reminds me a little bit of my own book, the way I wrote my own book. Because we were both in a situation where we were told to shut up, and instead we wrote a book. That started my involvement in politics and religion in 2008, a few meters from here, at a conference about terrorism in Copenhagen. I was invited there because at that time I was working as a psychologist in a youth prison, and there was a lot of talk about immigrant crime, immigrant terrorism, immigrant this and that. And my point of the conference was not, she also mentioned, and maybe not to paint with a broad painting thing, brush, but talk about what it is. And I said, let's talk about criminal Muslims. That became the title of the book, and became sort of like what kickstarted my involvement in the Free Press Society and so on, and the public debate. And the book is based on psychotherapy with young Muslim men, primarily men, but also a few girls. And at the same time, in the same period, not as many, but around 100 Danish or non-Muslim young people that I could also talk to, so and the same age group, more or less the same social level and so on. You could compare, a very good group to compare with. And I came out with 4 mental differences between the Muslim, let's say Muslim patients and the non-Muslim patients. And one is the view on anger, that we here in our Western societies, we see anger as a sign of weakness. Explode like this, it's a sign that we're weak, right? And we will have to walk a little bit like this and excuse ourselves for a period until people accept us again and we can be friends again. It's a sign that we lost friends. And in Islamic culture, Muslim culture, being angry is a sign of strength. Right? You can have this, not you, but you in your culture, where you come from. You have days of anger, right? You can celebrate anger, especially on Fridays. It's much more popular to be angry on Fridays. Right? Connected with certain religions. And you see also the people there who decides and rule and so on. It's not cool people like politicians, for example, here in our parliament here in Denmark, who want to keep calm during the debate. You know, they're usually the one who get the most sympathy in TV and so on. In their countries, the one who scream the loudest or hang the table or whatever. That's how it functions. So that's one difference. View and anger, it's very obvious. Another one concerns self-confidence, what we would call it, in Islamic culture, Muslim culture, they call it honor. Maybe we would say it's, if you're criticized, you sometimes are criticized, Lars, some of us are. Then if you remain calm and you see, aha, that's your point, okay, I disagree, I think it's like that. If you don't explode, you don't become irrational, you can handle it. Or if people are right, you say, okay, thank you for the nice advice, I'll try to adjust and try to change a little bit. Thank you. So you keep cool, stay calm, stiff up a little. And that's, if you ask a psychologist, any psychologist, I think they would say that's a sign of authenticity, it's a sign of self-confidence. You have your honor, you rest in yourself, you're based in yourself. And as we know, it's very different within Muslim circles where criticism is exactly the opposite. It's even it's not just, it's even expected to be right. Oh, now you criticize me, I can't handle it. And I don't have any arguments, I don't have any logic, but I will threaten you or even beat you or harm you to make you silent. And see, okay, if you're in a certain religion, you don't make a war.
Yep.
Yeah. And maybe their culture is seen as honorable, but I would say highly developed, more than 100-year-old Western science of psychology, we all say that it's a sign of weakness again. Low self-confidence, cannot handle. Again, a very different way of let's say, psychological tactics. A third, three out of 4 mental differences would consider self-responsibility, where we would say in our Western societies that we would call ourselves that we have what is called inner locus of control. That's a psychological term, but it means that we experience that the way our lives are shaped, what's happening in our lives, is mainly governed by the way that we handle our own lives, our own choices, our own way of handling outer circumstances, our own way of handling inner states of mind and emotions, and our own choices. That's inner locus of control. What happens is mainly decided from inside. We even have a whole industry occupied with that. Psychologist, right? People call them, and ladies' magazine, right? You can call them maybe even men's magazine. You can call them, you can read, you can talk to people, and they will tell you what can you do to change your situation. And what you experience if you get into close to Islamic culture, maybe you can be also, maybe you don't have to be a psychotherapist like myself, you just read a newspaper, but you will see that they are mainly pointing outside themselves. If they're looking for reason for their misery in their own country, for their misery in their own families and so on, they're pointing out. So they have what's called outer locus of control. And that is the source and the basis of the world famous and exceedingly embarrassing Muslim victim mentality. It was all somebody else's fault. And unluckily, that victim mentality, that mentality of outer locus of control have met far too often with some far too understanding social workers, politicians, and media also in our countries. And it's kind of a holy marriage. They can kind of come and complain and they will take them seriously. If you complain, it must be because there's something seriously wrong. Because in our culture, we only complain if something seriously wrong. And I think now people are discovering that, especially now the economy is changing, and say, okay, we're counting the krona and the pounds and the euros and so on, trying to find out where where's all that money gone, right? And now they're raising the taxes in Sweden 2% or more next year. So I think people will ask, maybe it's not just victims, maybe it's also because it's difficult for them to integrate. We need 3 things for anybody to integrate into any culture. You need to want it. You need to be allowed to do it, and you need to be able to do it. And you went through the process once, so you know, right? You really have to want it, right? And why should you want it if you get food, you get health care, you get a house, you get everything without it? Secondly, if you want it, it's maybe not even sure you're allowed. Maybe you get killed. You marry a kufa, a Catholic. But you have Danish friends or Swedish friends, or you go to the disco, you drink alcohol, you eat a sausage on the way home from the disco, or whatever, right? Something happened, right? Sent to Somalia for some re-education by a nice uncle or something like that. So that's the second thing, probably not allowed. And if you want to, maybe and you're allowed to, you also have to be able to. You have to have brains, to learn the language, to learn the way of social behavior. You have to learn how to work, to function in the work market, and all those things. It's a big thing to go to another country, to learn all the formal things, but also the informal things, the way of being together. So.
But they're not allowed, some liberal Muslim.
They're not allowed.
They're not allowed
They
to.
want to,
They're kafir, and even if they lived under Sharia, they'll be killed. Because they're not Muslim.
You have this underground Sharia everywhere in our society.
Yeah.
Looking out. Anyway, so that's the third mentioned difference with the sense of self-responsibility. But then there's a fourth thing that concerns tolerance. And we are always taught to be tolerant. In our culture, a good person, I would say to a large extent, Christianity is now a little, maybe not the best thing that happened, but what happened is it changed from Christianity to now to a more like what some would call a humanistic mindset. That means that we should be open and tolerant. If you're open and tolerant, you're a good person. In your old days, you were a good person, dressed nicely on Sundays and went to the church.
But in Islam, you're stupid.
So that's a definition, right? And so that's what we taught already from kindergarten, be open and tolerant, all the way through into universities. And later, newspapers tell us to be like that. And it is exactly, again, the opposite, like you explained very good before. Very good. In Islamic societies, we're taught to be intolerant. You should not kill the innocent, it says in the Quran. But it's only Muslims who are innocent.
Yeah, I
You
have
cannot be friends with the
kafir.
kafir or marry them and so on. Again, there's a very big difference. And it makes us, in our societies, exceedingly vulnerable because it means that the pressure only goes one way. Only goes one way. We are open and tolerant, and they are solid and brutal and intolerant. It means that you could say the cultural osmotic pressure, I think it's called in physics or chemistry. It's only moves one way into our society. We have no chance of moving the other way.
No.
Maybe we can get a job somewhere, we can get some welfare, go to our schools and kindergartens. Of course, there are people who manage the three things, wanting to, being allowed to, and being able to. Small amount. It is small. And it means that there's only one way our society is moving, and that is moving to become more and more Islam. And that means more and more steps towards it. And that's where we come to your book, Lars, with how women are treated. I would say I've come myself from a humanistic study at Copenhagen, University of Copenhagen, where we have all these soft sciences, anthropology and psychology. We should, psychologists should spend more time on understanding Islam from psychological angle. I think we really have, psychology really has something to contribute with. And unfortunately, we don't. Several times submitted articles to the Danish magazine for psychologists, but they always say, we will look at it, but they're looking, but they don't read it. So, yeah. And first of all, of course, for the women's sake, right? For them, that's the first thing, because they are the first and the worst victims of Islam. It's the Muslim women. Next, when we come with the kafirs and so on. The Muslim women are the first.
You also said something about in your foreword that there is no such thing as love between one man and one woman.
Exactly.
Can you explain something about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, because it is like that, right? To be really in love, to have a love relationship with another person, one first of all has to be. We have to be. We cannot have one part who has had power over the other, and the other part is fearing the other one. We cannot have that. Real love to really come out, really a true embrace of two people, really loving each other, and have this strong, very important, and very pleasant, and also very maturing emotion and maturing experience, which is called love. Right? You need equality. And you can never have that in a culture where a man, by the law, not our law, but their law, which is the one that they follow, is superior to the woman.
And I'm half-brain, I'm stupid.
Yeah, the woman is considered to be more like a child and a grown-up.
Yeah.
So, a man is allowed to beat her if she won't do it, as he said. So that means that we have a massive lack of love in Muslim culture.
A massive lack of love.
Yeah. I assume it has a different character than we see here. Now we are here in Christiansborg, where you see politicians behave quite well.
I imagine that there are some restraints in the upper echelons.
Probably there is also to be able to work together, but you also regularly see explosions. Also on TV, you see TV from Arab TV stations and so on. You see them throwing chairs and each other.
That was a minor question.
Yeah. I assume that, of course, there are always individual differences.
Can I make a point to that? You asked us to talk about how we reach out to Muslim women.
Yep.
I have to say, in Britain, there are 2 points on this. One of them is that there is a deliberate and concerted effort to prevent us from reaching out to Muslim women. And the other one is multiculturalism. If you go onto the Sharia Watch website, I wrote quite a long article about this. But Baroness Cox, a member of the House of Lords in London, she introduced a bill, the Arbitration and Mediation Services Equalities Bill. And what she wanted to do with this was to make the Sharia courts in Britain, to bring them into line with the law of the land, so the Equality Act and the Human Rights Act and all the rest of it. So they wouldn't be able to treat a woman's word as worth half of a man's. And so I've been campaigning with Baroness Cox for a long time to get these places closed down. So one of the things that she suggested, we had a bill just last year, which among other things criminalised forced marriage. What she suggested was, in an amendment to this bill, you keep telling us that women are using Sharia courts by choice. It's their choice. We have freedom of religion, people must be able to be free to choose a Sharia court. So can we at least, at the very least, make sure this is an informed choice? Can we put something into the law that demands that the imams who run the Sharia courts tell the women in front of them, this is not, by the way, the law of the land, it's private arbitration, you can ignore it if you want to, you don't have to be here. You can instead go to English law and get your real rights. This is the right you'll have with us, these are the rights you'll have under Sharia. Pick one. No strings attached, no hard feelings, pick one. They refused, obviously. They refused to allow us to do this. Now, the government's argument against closing down Sharia courts is the English law is there, the law of the land is there, everyone can use it, these women can turn to English law if they want to. So what Baroness Cox said, fine, but let us tell them that the English law is there if they want it, and what their rights will be under English law. The government's response, this is a Conservative government, David Cameron's government, said, no, we won't allow you to do this because, and I quote them, we don't want to undermine religious leaders. So it's exactly the appeasement I was talking about. They will do nothing to upset the imams, either in Britain or here in Europe or anywhere in the world. They are petrified of the imams. And very quickly, one more point is the multiculturalism. Multiculturalism in Britain is sanitized, it's God in Britain. You cannot argue with it. There was a young Muslim woman, who wrote a book, The Imam's Daughter, I highly recommend it. She was, it suggests, an imam's daughter, and she was raped and abused by her father for many, many years. She finally, after several years, got the courage to tell her school teachers what was happening to her at home. Her school teachers, using the doctrine of multiculturalism, found her a culturally appropriate social worker to talk to. She came home from school either that evening or a couple of evenings later or whatever. The culturally appropriate social worker was sitting in her living room, chatting with her father, knowing he was the local imam, told her father, this is what your daughter is saying about you, she's bringing shame on your family, and that night, as she wrote, she got the very worst beating of her life. That's the problem. These are the problems. We have got to wake up to stop multiculturalism and apply the law of the land to everybody. And at least, if you're going to argue that people have a choice, then at least let us tell them what that choice is. But they won't, because they're enthralled to the imams.
Thank you. It's a great point, Anne-Marie. I think time is running up for us.
Yes.
Does anybody have another question? No? Does it look like it?
So I didn't so well.
We did, yeah.
But I can say that I think that we should make a small applaud for this hour here in this room. What do you say about that?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Marie, for letting us be here. And you all have a copy of the book if you want it signed by Lars, please feel free. I'm sure.